So hi, Emma. It's great to have you on the show with us today.
Hi, Melitta. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. And you're really an executive voice coach and really help women to build that trust and credibility and not just speak up for themselves, but to be heard and respected and get their views across without having to change who they are. So they can do so with complete authenticity and integrity. And I love that. So I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into that subject. But could you start by introducing us to how you got your business started in the first place?
Yeah, sure. I had a very squiggly career. So I used to be really embarrassed about that. I used to admire my friends that went through school and then university and came out and they were just a thing, like a lawyer or a psychologist. And I didn't. I moved around. So I started in pharmaceutical sales, which I was really good at, but I didn't love. And then I moved to train as a speech and language therapist because I liked medicine, but I come from a medical family. So I was like, I'm not doing medicine. No, that's not for me. And then I decided to become a speech and language therapist. And I loved being a therapist. I really didn't enjoy being in the NHS, particularly having come from pharma where, decisions are made pretty quickly, things get action, stuff gets done. I found the NHS is a very difficult place to get things changed and moved on. So I found that a bit difficult. So I moved out of there and into the corporate world. And I joined a really small company who were running events. And when I joined, there was just 6 of us. When I left about 10 years later, there was 30. And I left as operations director. So I sort of worked my way up and through the company. And I loved it. It was such fun. It was really, there's so much energy. And my job, so obviously as operations, I was looking after the teams internally, but my client side was looking after the messaging through the events because I had an understanding of communication. So it was like, what do we want the delegates to think, feel, and do before, during, and after the event? And so what would happen was on site, the production team would come to me and go, Emma, can you please go and sort out, Bob, he's just an awful presenter and we don't, please go and help. So I would go and I would help and I loved it, but I always felt like a bit of a fraud. I always thought someone was going to come and tap me on the shoulder and say, I don't really know what you're talking about, do you? And then I had my kids and I realized I just couldn't go back to those long hours, that huge travel, just being away. It was exhausting. So I decided to stay at home with the kids for a bit. And I just found over a few years, my confidence and my voice begin to disappear. I started to think, I don't have much to say. I don't know how to say it. And I was really shocked and I was really worried about this. And I kept thinking back to that time when I was helping people be better presenters. And so I decided to go to the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. And I did a master's degree in voice coaching and training. And it was incredibly tough. It was full time. My daughter was only 3 at the time, 9 till 6, Monday to Friday, and we were teaching on top of that. And so I'd help with homework and then I'd have to start my study. But it was the most transformational year. And I rediscovered my voice and I discovered a real passion for helping people find and use their voices. And so when I left, that's how Speaking at Work got born. So I was able to bring all the sort of science aspect of being a speech and language therapist and then combine it with the arts training from the master's degree. And because of the business knowledge that I had, apply it to business so that people can really kind of perform at their best and be visible, be credible, and get known as the impactful leader that they possibly, the best they can be within their industry.
Well, I love so much about what you've just said, and I'm sure lots of listeners are nodding along and yes, me too.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that you said, oh, I had a squiggly career. And I think very often we can belittle the experiences that we've had because they haven't followed what everyone else has done, or they don't correspond to the norm or what we expected. But actually that gives you just such a breadth of knowledge of yourself and that chance to explore different aspects of your skills. And perhaps if you hadn't had such a squiggly career, you wouldn't have discovered your passion
No.
so easily.
No, I totally agree. And I honestly, there isn't a coaching session that goes by that I don't draw on something from one of those areas of life, and I do a secret, yay, I'm so happy I did that thing. But I genuinely used to feel embarrassed about it.
Yeah, I think that's a very common feeling as well, that yeah, we feel like we should be like everybody else, and that's, I don't know why we feel so compelled to beat ourselves up over things. And my career wasn't squiggly, but I just moved from so many different industries, that the same thing. I was going, gosh, I'm not an expert in banking because I haven't been here for forever. I was in shipping and IT and design and all sorts, always doing the same thing. But in the end, you realize actually these experiences are actually an asset, and it gives you so many different insights, as you said, that you later in life, in different situations, you can draw on these things, and so it actually makes you stronger in the end.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%.
So you refound your confidence. You took the courage to go back to school and restudy, which is so brave. I remember when I did my master's degree, it was really hard, but I was single in my 20s. I had energy and I had nothing else to do. So I'm always so admire people who have done that around kids and other challenges. So really, it shows strength of character for sure. So when you got your business started, how was that compared to what you thought it was going to be? Did you have any expectations before you went in?
Um, I think I had expectations that it would be a bit like the business that I'd run before, the event management business. But the reality is that that was not a digital business. That was a very much face-to-face business. It was very much through referrals. Whereas now the business that I run, Speaking at Work, is much more what I would consider to be a digital business. So the marketing is digital. In fact, as of now, the delivery is digital. So it's a very different experience. And I think when I went into it, I was feeling very strong in my sort of sense that I was an expert in my field. And then you become an entrepreneur, and suddenly you're so not an expert because there's so much to learn. Particularly for me, the tech and the digital stuff was something I didn't really know about. So I had this huge learning journey. And I think for a little while, the sort of concept of being a field expert and not an entrepreneur, they sort of conflated, and I just generally felt like an inexpert at pretty much everything for a bit. And so there was a lot of work to do to kind of untangle those two things. So I think that was a little bit of a shock for a while. I think also there's a big difference when you start your own business, when you have to sell yourself. Then you may have been an absolute expert. If you've moved from the corporate world into an entrepreneurial role, you may have sold services. You may have been the person that delivered those services. But when you have to go out and say, I've designed this, I deliver this, something changes. Whether this is true for men, I don't know, but I absolutely categorically know that it's true for women. Something changes in you, and it's so much harder at first to have that conversation. So I think that was interesting. I think that the idea of working on the business and working in the business was something that took me a while to kind of get to grips with, and I still do. So we want to kind of even out this sort of sales and delivery kind of cycles. But once you sort of get into that idea, things do start to even out.
Yeah, again, you've just touched on so many things there. And most people start a business around something that they're really, really good at. Maybe they're amazing at cutting hair, or like helping people with their voice and speech delivery. But then they realize, oh, actually, there's a lot more than that to running a business. Maybe they've got their website up and running, and then like, but where are all the clients? And you're right, you have to then go and sell yourself. And often that feels like, well, am I really worth it? And that taps into a big existing issue for so many people. Am I really worth this? And what you need to think about, or one way I encourage my clients to think differently, is like, okay, you're not putting a price on yourself, but you're putting a price on the results and transformation your client's going to get. Like, what is that worth to them? And then you kind of take that little step away, you don't making it so personal, and then you can start getting a bit more objective about the prices you're charging. but it's not easy, is it? And you can sell other people so easily. Oh, here's my friend, they're amazing, and you can sell them all day. But when it comes to yourself, it's always quite difficult. But I think that's normal. But it kind of takes getting a system in place and starting to build your confidence around that. So what do you think is there anything in particular you've done that you can pinpoint? Okay, that is what I did to help me get more used to my new position as a business owner and being able to sell myself.
I think that the big thing is separating out that you are a field expert. So I am a field expert. I do know my stuff. So I can provide my clients with transformations, the ones that I promise. So I think it was the big change for me. I think two things. One, the first big change is accepting that I was an expert in that area. And I think the second is having help to create a structure to sell in a way that doesn't feel like selling. So that it's really focused on helping the clients get to where they want to be. And when you have the conversation in that way, it doesn't feel like it's a sales pitch. But I think you really need help to do that. I think it's very difficult to do that by yourself because you can't be quite objective enough about it. So I think you need a sort of objective outside view to help that happen.
Yeah, I think with sales, you definitely need a process, but you need to take it from an approach of service. And in the episode with Lisa McLeod, who wrote the book Selling with Noble Purpose, she makes the point that sales is the only profession that's defined by people who do it badly. And the thing is, when people do it well, you don't think of it as sales. You just think of it as service or mentoring or help in some way. You don't realize, oh, actually that was sales, because if you do a sales call well, the person has transformed something by the end of it. They've made a new realization, because you really need to help them gather the information they need to know if it's a good decision for them to make, and you need to do that to know if you are the right person to serve them. So it's really a joint exploratory process, which once you do that and you have the right approach, it actually becomes quite fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you have gone on this journey of developing out your passion as around helping people to project their voice and get their message across clearly and coherently. And then you took a big step backwards and lost your confidence in that, but then regained it through your education. What do you think it is? Have you noticed anything through that journey that is common in terms of the challenges that people have when they have to speak up for themselves?
Yeah, I think there's three things that women find difficult, and they all come back to space, this sort of idea of space, taking up the right amount of space. Look, I think we have to sort of accept or at least recognize some of this stuff is systemic. So it's cultural and it's globally cultural. So there are systems in place that make it harder for women to speak up. But there are lots of things that we can personally do ourselves that make a difference. But I think these three things that we generally find difficult are, it's about mind space, it's about body space, and it's about the vocal space. So in terms of the mind space, I'm going to refer back to this idea of expertise. I think we, as we've discussed, we have a really complex relationship with our expertise. And culturally, we're not really encouraged to stand up and say, I'm good at this. And you can hear it and you can see it in women's language. When they've had great success, they say we. I caught myself doing it this morning. I was on a sales call and I said, we have created, and I stopped myself and I said, I'm sorry, no, I have created. And the woman thought I was a bit mad. I said, no, but it's really important that I owned that it was me that did that. And she laughed. But we don't own our expertise particularly well. I'm sure you've heard this, women saying, oh, well, when I've got my master's degree, or when I've been in this job for a little bit longer, or when I've got a bit more experience, then I'll put myself forward for this, or then. So we're always stalling for more time because we don't feel quite ready. But there's a bit of a spoiler: we never feel ready. You just don't. And by the time you feel ready, you're actually ready for the job after the one that you're going for, or the sale after the one that you're going for. So with all this going on, there's a lot of noise, and when we have all that noise, it leaks out. It'll come out in your body, your breath, and your voice somehow or another, and that means your audience are going to pick it up. Whether that's an audience of one person or 100, they will sense there's something that's not quite truthful or authentic about what you're saying. And so that becomes a bit problematic, because you're not going to move your audience along that know, like, and trust pathway, because they're going to be unconsciously probably, but going, not quite right here. That's the first and sort of quite big space that we have an issue with.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up that we thing, because I hear it all the time, and it's something I'm quite sensitive at, because I've told you this story before, that I got thrown out of an interview once for lying because I kept saying we. It's like, oh, and we did this and we did that, meaning kind of me as part of a company. And the woman literally stood up and threw my CV at me and said, "Get out, I'm sick of your lies." I was like, what lies? I was so shocked. But then she said, you've said we did this, we did that. I think you're passing someone else's work off as your own. I was like, but there was no one else. Literally, I worked in a company of shipping experts and engineers. I was the only person doing marketing and branding. Like, literally, there was no one else to do what I was doing. But that wasn't the impression she got. And by the time I spoke up about that, it was too late. The impression had gone, and yeah, I cried all the way home. But it was like the biggest lesson I ever had. And since that day, I've really made a conscious effort to own my skills and my achievements. And since I've done that, nobody has ever said, "Oh, she's bragging," or anything like that. As you say, it's just people have trusted me more. They've believed that, great, this project's in good hands because she can do this. And when I started my women's network in the bank, that was the one thing that the men told me, that it was the first time they'd seen women in a leadership capacity and owning their skills. So yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I think it's something that's one thing we can definitely take in our own hands and do something about, and very, very easily.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just start noticing. I think it's really easy to jump into the kind of like, oh, I did it again. I could have done that this morning. I could have gone, oh, you said we again. But it's like, isn't that interesting? I said we. That's interesting that I'm doing that in a sales situation. So I know that I've got a little bit of work to do on my sort of mind space when it comes to sales. So it's just, rather than reprimanding yourself for doing it, just notice it and go, isn't that interesting? And it sort of takes away the tension of it, and be curious about it, and then you're more likely to find the answer by doing that than getting cross with yourself, because that doesn't help anybody.
No, exactly.
So the next space is body space. That's the next place that people find, that their women particularly find it difficult. So we're socially conditioned to take up less space. Feminine means small, delicate, fragile. And if you look back to history, look back to things like foot binding and corsets, or to more current history, extreme dieting, women are only regarded as feminine if they're small, if they're tiny. So we don't naturally take up space, but do we not take up the space that we're due, we actually diminish our space. So it's really hard to raise your credibility or visibility if you're being small. Now, I bet there's probably quite a few people listening who are saying, well, I don't do that. I don't not take up my space. But if you've ever stood with your feet crossed, if you've ever walked into a meeting room and sat to one side, or sat away from where the action is going on, or you've walked in and you've got folders or files or a diary or something in front of you, when you're talking or suggesting something, if you've got your head to one side in this sort of slightly tilted way, like you were listening but you're making a suggestion, you're not taking up the right amount of space. So it's all really subtle. I was talking to a lady this morning, and she was talking about her experience. She's got 20 years experience working in quite a male dominated industry, and she's a real expert in this one specific field. And as she was telling me about her expertise, she's literally pulling away from me and sort of semi-closing her eyes, because she wasn't quite feeling okay with this idea of her being an expert, which she absolutely categorically is. So it plays out really subtly, and it undermines your credibility if that's what's happening.
Yeah, and I see it with, so in my book about networking, I've talked about this, and it doesn't just undermine your credibility to other people, and they think, oh, they see you as not confident and assume that that's because you don't really know what you're talking about. But also it undermines your credibility to yourself. It sends that subtle message internally as well, because you're not centered, you're not feeling strong, you're not feeling stable, and that makes it even harder to get your voice across.
Yeah, you start to doubt yourself. You start to kind of think, do I know this? Is this right? Maybe I've made a mistake, and then that's going to come across.
Yeah, and I love that this is another tip where it's just one of those small things that once you're aware of it, you can start to tune into and stop doing it. So like, okay, well, how can I put my elbows out and kind of take up a bit more space here and lean into the table and really make sure that people know you're there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some really simple things you can do body space wise. I mean, the number one thing I would say is put your feet on the floor, because that makes a huge difference to how confident and how stable you feel. I know it sounds really daft because you don't speak with your feet, but it just makes a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's that I don't know if it's related, but I remember watching a documentary about children with dyslexia. And when they put both feet on the floor, they could read. And when they put their feet up, they couldn't. Not all of them, but in some cases. So just putting those 2 feet on the floor does change something inside of you and make you more able to think clearly, I guess.
Yeah. Well, if you've got your feet on the sort of the kind of like anatomy behind it is, if your feet are on the floor, your belly can relax, because if your feet aren't on the floor, you're having to tense your tummy, and you can only really breathe deeply if your tummy is relaxed. So it could be literally a lack of oxygen. Is if you hold your breath, you can't think. Literally, you can't think, because your body goes flight, fright, freeze. So you're not thinking. You're just listening. You're trying to find that dinosaur. So it could be to do with the fact that the kids didn't have enough oxygen in their system.
Yeah.
Their feet down.
Interesting. But yeah, it's again one of those simple things. And I've noticed this myself. I read a great book called Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office when I was in working in corporate, and I was turning every page going, oh no, I do that. Oh no, I do that. And what's really nice is it just has little bite-sized things. Are you doing this? Then this is what to do. And that was one of the ones, is to take up more space. And as soon as I did, and sit next to the person who's running the meeting. So as soon as I did those 2 things, instantly people started listening more. It was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Or sit opposite them. The other thing to do is sit opposite them, so you can catch their eye when you want to say something. That's really handy.
Oh yeah. Ooh, I like it.
Yeah,
So that's the mind space and the body space. What about the vocal space?
so there's three things I generally see women doing more often than men, but not exclusively. So the first one is the disembodied voice. So I'll try. So a disembodied voice sounds a bit like this. So it's just coming out of your head. So I don't know if you can hear a difference now. So my voice sounds perhaps a little bit thinner, a bit lighter. Some people might describe it as a little bit more shrill, particularly if I've got a bit excited and started to talk quickly or decisively about something. So if I just relax and allow my voice to drop back down into my body. So this is what I would describe as an embodied voice. So it sounds different. It literally sounds like it's coming out of my body, not just out of my head. And again, it's, if you've got your feet on the floor, your belly can relax, you've got more breath, it supports a stronger, more confident voice. So it comes back to the sort of anatomy working for you rather than against you.
It's amazing how when you changed, how more trustworthy you sounded, and you were a little bit slower as well when it was coming from the body, as to when it was just you were doing the which I was like, oh, this sounds like dangerous.
Well, exactly, because we're conditioned to think that high noises are danger. They're signs of danger. So babies crying, screaming, all the things that are bad happen at high pitches. That's alarm sounds. And we're conditioned biologically to think that lower sounds are reassuring. they're comfortable. So there's a real biology at play here.
Yeah, and I remember when I started my women's network many years ago, I started doing a lot of research into well, why are women at a disadvantage, and what's the key to where's all of this coming from. And I remember reading one book, and they were explaining how the most men, I think our generation is starting to be a little bit different, but most older men, they haven't grown up having girls as friends. They've only grown up with girls being the mother or the wife or the daughter, pretty much. And so they are going to put you into one of those categories. And so you have to figure out which category they've put you into, and use that to your advantage. So you can use each role to your advantage. But when you have that disembodied voice that you've just mentioned, you are putting yourself in the category of the nagging mum or the nagging wife instantly before they even listen to what you say. So so yeah, it was interesting. It just came back to me, that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, having that sort of lower embodied voice is going to make a really big difference.
Mm.
And then I think the final thing that I see most regularly is this sort of concept that when we get to the end of an idea, it just kind of trails away and we don't really stand up for what we just said. And it makes such a difference if you really support your idea all the way to the end. So, it sounds like I'm much more behind my own idea. I believe my idea. So if you're out and you're selling to clients, or you're talking to strategic partners, they want a sense of credibility, certainty, and confidence. So that means you've got to stand by your own ideas. And if you trail off, it sounds like you don't believe your own ideas. So why on earth would they? So, we really have to stand by our ideas and support them all the way to the end.
Yeah, and I think I see that quite a lot, but also not just trailing off, but saying at the end, perhaps, maybe. Do you think so? It's like, no, don't give them the option. Say this is what we're doing, and let them kind of challenge you on that.
Absolutely, yeah. Seeking permission. It's like you
Yeah,
don't need anybody's permission to have an idea. It's okay, you can have an idea. It may not be the idea that works, and that's absolutely fine. And I think that comes back to this idea of expertise, is that we don't voice our ideas until they're absolutely fully formed, until we really know that they're going to work. But by that point, somebody else has already put that forward in a half-formed way, and it's been taken up. So we've missed our opportunity. So, getting behind our own expertise, standing by ourselves, and committing to saying that whatever it is, the idea that we have, will make a big difference.
yeah, and I think a lot of women are naturally quite collaborative. So if you do put your idea out there, and other people can sort of pick holes in it a little bit, or say, well, what about this? Yeah, great idea. What can we do about that? And you can build on that idea. Then it's really an invitation. But if you just trail off, then it just disappears into nothing and doesn't ever get taken forward.
Yeah, there's an exercise that we do with leaders, which is called and yes. And so the idea is you just have to put ideas in. And it actually comes from an improvisation technique. So you have to build on whatever somebody else gives you. So somebody says, right, I think we should design a blue toaster. I think our clients really would love a blue toaster. We need to start selling blue toasters. You have to say, and yes, or I think that's a great idea. And the reason I think blue toasters would be fantastic was because, and then the next person has to build on that. And you just have to and it gets us out of this habit of going, but that won't work. Why would our clients want blue toasters? Nobody wants a blue toaster. And so the idea is sort of shut down and doesn't have a chance to breathe before it's been explored. And it happens so often. And so, potentially brilliant ideas get lost before they've even had a chance to thrive.
Yeah. I saw that with my design background. It's always, they really encourage you, just put the craziest ideas out there, because maybe that doesn't work, but it may spark something that an element of that could work. And it may spark someone else to think, oh, well, that bit's quite interesting if you add it to this idea, and then someone else can jump in. But unless you put these crazy ideas out there, you can't rationalize them down to something interesting and usable.
No, absolutely. I think it's really important just to, I think, there's a lot of research out there that suggests that women get about 2/3 of the airtime of their male colleagues. So if you're running your own business and you're in a sales meeting with other men, and you're the only woman, the chances are you'll get 2/3 less time to speak. And that has an issue in terms of your perceived authority, because we perceive authority in terms of how much somebody speaks. So if you want to be the person who's really running the meeting, then you have to keep speaking. You have to speak for a bit longer than you feel comfortable for, because that probably means it's about the same amount of time as the men that you're working with.
So is there any advice you can give on that point as to what to say? Because one thing you don't want to do is just talk drivel, because that's not going to help your credibility either.
No, not at all. So really so talking about your idea, fleshing out your idea a little bit. But then if you feel like you're coming to the end of what you've got to say, like you say, before you get into that kind of that point where you're maybe asking for permission, what do you think? Is it okay? Or maybe I'm a bit off track here, or those kind of things. What we do is you bring somebody else into the conversation. So you might then say, so if there's other women in the room, this is a brilliant opportunity to say, oh, Melitta, I haven't heard what you think about this. What's your idea? Or how would this branch of our clients react to that, do you think? Or how will it impact on this element of our business? So that you're still talking and you're still controlling the conversation. You can then have a conversation rather than just be the person that's speaking. So using our naturally collaborative skills to build the conversation is really effective.
I love that. and it plays to our strengths, as you say. It's something that we can naturally do and like to. So instead of going to that perhaps moment, we can just say, as you say, I love that idea. It's like, well, how would that work for your department? Can you see that working there? What would be your view on that? And then you still have authority, but you're opening that door to say, well, this isn't my final offer, but what else can you bring to the table?
Yeah, I think all these things are really, really key for for entrepreneurs, particularly because building your own credibility, building your visibility so that you become known as a thought leader in your particular field, your particular community, is so important. That you're getting your ideas out in front of the right people at the right time. Because if you've got to go and get funding, you're looking for investment, they're going to look at how you present yourself, your sort of personal credibility. And they're going to look at your expertise. Obviously, they're going to do all their due diligence and look at the finances and the team that you've built and the business plan and all of that. But actually, most venture capitalists are interested in the story, and they're interested in you. So they want to buy into you and your story and the story of the business before they're interested in all those other things. So your sort of personal credibility and the visibility that you've had prior to coming to ask for investment is really key. And then if you move to the other end of that, you've scaled your business and maybe you're looking for an exit, there's a direct correlation between what your company will be valued at and your personal ability to talk to your potential buyers or your customers. Or if you're doing an IPO, you're going to have to say the same thing over and over again to many, many people. How credible are you? How visible have you been before this point that people can buy into you and your story? It's really key in all elements of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see so many women shy away from that. They started their business, but they don't want to be seen as the face of their business. They don't want to step into that leadership role and speak up and be visible for their values, their story, their beliefs, their failures even. But that's exactly what people want. And each month I do a perfecting your pitch session where entrepreneurs can come and practice their pitch. But so often we see people trying to be professional. And by professional, they use long words and they have it's boring basically. And the thing I'm always looking out for is the story, because that's the bit that I love. I want to be able to relate to these people and feel that I'm behind their vision and I want to be part of their journey. That's really what I'm looking for. And I think that's what every audience is looking for. They want to be able to relate to you, to see, is this someone that I want to work with? Is it someone I want to back? Is there someone that I want to support in some way? And if they don't get to know who you are, they can't make that decision. And you just become just another business. You go into that pool. You have to have that personality, and everybody has it. But I think you mentioned this, was it you mentioned it earlier, saying that you just didn't really see yourself as anything different. I think that was a different conversation. I have so many conversations. But I saw it when I was doing internal communications, for example, and I'd go and interview someone and well, why do you want to interview me? My job's not interesting. I'm not very interesting. And as soon as you started questioning them, you find out they were fascinating. And I think we don't really see our strengths in our story, but it's really important. Do you have any advice for anyone who is feeling that way, feeling no one's interested in me?
Yes. So number one, that's not true. They really are. We're essentially nosy human beings. We want to know about the person. But I mean, if you sort of take it back to science, there's three things that we're looking for when we are an audience and we're looking to be persuaded. So we want to see, is this logical? Does it make sense? Does it flow? Is there evidence? We want to see, and this is the really important bit, we want to see humanity. We want to see that there is some kind of human connection in there. You've got to win our hearts over. So if you did a presentation, if you're talking about your business and you're only talking about the figures and you're only talking about the business plan, who cares? It's like, yeah, it's great. It's really neat. It's lovely. Well done. But if you tell us about why you're trying to do it, what is it you're trying to achieve? So I could tell you technically all the things that I do in my business, all the things, how I coach. And I think it's fascinating, but not many other people would. But if I tell you that I secretly want to create an army of Jacinda Aherns. I think she's an amazing communicator. I think she's an amazing leader. And I think the world even would be a better place with more women like her. It's so much more compelling. But it's no good in and of itself because there's nothing to back it up. So I could tell you that dream, I could tell you that idea, then I can tell you logically how I'm going to do that. And then we have to have the credibility. So that's how you say it. And if you've got all of those elements, so you've got the emotional content, if you've got the logical and the rationale and the sort of data to back up, and it's well delivered, then you're going to persuade your audience. But if you have one or two of those elements and not all three, it isn't going to work quite as effectively.
Yeah. And when you share something that's part of your passion or your vision, you have that confidence and passion comes across, and it's the energy that people remember. And I think that what the story you just shared there, that little soundbite, is so visual as well. I'm sure everyone's going to go away imagining and praying for the moment we have this army of Jacindas out there.
Absolutely. I hope so. Yeah, you buy into it because you're either going to buy into it because it speaks to your values, or you're not. And if you're an entrepreneur, you don't want to be doing business with people who don't have your values, who don't share the same ideas and dreams. It isn't going to be a comfortable match. So be truthful, be yourself, tell your real story, and you'll find the audience that wants to work with you.
Yeah. And I think that's what being professional really is all about, is being you, being really integral with who you are. Is that the right word? I know you have integrity.
Yeah, to have integrity. I don't know.
To have integrity, to show up with integrity. There we go. And to be authentic and just be you. That's what people are going to buy into and remember and trust. And if, as you say, if you're not quite being you, then there's always going to be that little room for doubt in the customer's mind. And then if you aren't 100% confident in yourself, then they're not going to be either. So it's really, really important. And yeah, we love stories. And it's so, the nice thing about basing your communications around your stories and your values is they're always going to be yours. And you don't have to worry about remembering exactly what to say, because it's your story. You just have to tell your story and stand up for your values and stay true to all of that. And then it's easy peasy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've just loved everything you shared. If there's someone out there and they're wondering, well, how can I start developing my voice? What's the first step if they want to take what you've been teaching and kind of take it to that next level and really discover how they can amplify their voice and build this trust and credibility through their presence?
I think there's a lot of inner work that needs to be done. I think you really have to know what your values are. So truthfully, what do I stand for? I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is about taking up that little bit more space. So just actively having your shoulders back just a little bit more, sitting a little bit more upright. I think those are two really good steps to they will feel uncomfortable to start with, but they're really good steps to starting to kind of believe in yourself and take up the space. And then with the voice, I think if you've tapped into what your story is and you're really, really clear about what your values are, you'll find your voice will start to change. So I would start with being a bit more definitive about things you really believe in, because we tend to be not quite as definitive as we need to be sometimes. So I would start with being a little bit more standing behind the things that you believe are the right things to do. So I think this is the right course of action for us now because, and you support your idea all the way through to the end. So decide what your values are, take up a little bit more space and be a bit more definitive based on those values. And I think that starts to it's like a little stone. Once it starts rolling, it really gathers speed. But those are 3 tiny steps that everybody can take to start feeling and being more credible.
I love that. And everyone can start doing that straight away. They don't need any special materials or equipment or anything. You can just start to do that bit of exploration and put it into practice.
I think there's one little thing I would say about breathing as well. This is a really easy one. So if you're feeling a bit tight, a bit stressed because you've got to go and do something that's a little bit outside your comfort zone, your friends, your family will say to you, take a deep breath. It's all right, just take a deep breath. Don't. It's the worst advice they could possibly give you. It's well-meaning, but it's wrong, because your body, when you're feeling like that, is essentially like a balloon that's already filled with air. So if I try and put more air in that balloon, it's just going to burst. That's the only thing it can do. So actually the best thing we can do when we're feeling a bit tight, a bit stressed, is actually breathe out. So a really long, slow breath out. And then just relax and let the body call for the air. You'll find you feel so much calmer. If you do that 3 times, you'll actually feel like your mind slows down, your thoughts slow down, and your body feels a lot less tense. You can disappear off into a room and do that. It'll take you 30 seconds and you'll feel so much together, so much better and so much more together.
I love that. I've been telling everyone the reverse. So I've learned something really important. I'm going to change my advice now. Thank you very much.
If in doubt, breathe out.
Oh, it even rhymes. Perfect. I know from my communication work, it was always like things in 3s or things that rhyme or words of 1 syllable. These are all the things you can use to make a power statement, something that really sticks in the mind.
Yeah.
If in doubt, breathe out. I like that.
You're welcome.
Emma, I've really enjoyed this conversation. You have shared so much value and some incredible tips that everyone can go away and actually put into practice and start building more confidence and credibility in the marketplace as well, which is fantastic. So thank you so much for that.
Pleasure. It's been really lovely to talk to you.
Is there any last piece of advice you would like to leave the audience with?
I think this idea of being your own cheerleader is really, really important. We're really good at having detractive thoughts or detractor thoughts. Things are going, you can't do this, not yet, in a minute, everyone else knows more than you. We're really good at those. And I think we're less good at the sort of inner cheerleading and the inner mentoring, the sort of calm voice that says, you know what, you might not have all of this, you don't necessarily know everything, but you know enough, and that's okay. That sort of voice that stands by yourself, because I think that's the beginning of real credibility, because from there you can move to, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, and that's okay, but I do know somebody I can go and ask. So I think that sense of cheerleading, that sense of inner mentoring, is something that we definitely all could tap into more and make more of. And again, something we can all do. It's free. You don't have to go anywhere, do anything special. You just have to kind of learn to listen to that voice a little bit more than listening to the inner critic.
I love that. And I learned a long time ago that you have this inner critic that, okay, but I can't do anything about that. What can I do? And push it to be your cheerleader. And it's incredible once you do. This little inner voice has all the answers you need. It can be incredibly and support it when you kind of push it into and give it that opportunity. So I love that advice.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally in tune with your, it knows what you believe. It's totally in tune with your values. It's not going to suggest anything that isn't going to work for you if you listen to it. If you have to learn to listen to it.
Yes, exactly. Emma, thank you so much. And for anyone who's listening to this podcast on the go, how can they find you if they want to know more about what the work that you do and how you can support them?
LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me. So it's Emma Wainer at LinkedIn.
Great. And your company is called Speaking at Work.
Speaking at Work, yes.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Emma.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Melitta.